Welcome to our new class on Celtic music. You could join me today. You're not going to be listening to any McKenna. She's terrible. Goodness this. Okay, so let me just, I'm sorry, I got to turn this. All right, so I'm glad you like that. Welcome to AP Biology, 7th period, Tuesday, last period of the day, I know. Just a learning day, guys, just a learning day. So just give me a little bit of attention at the beginning of class. I'm going to explain some things that are usually difficult for people to understand when they are learning for the first time about cell transport. So I want to go over that first. You probably might want to take notes on this. Maybe there's just some drawings I'm going to make, and it's not going to take long, just very quick, some drawings that will help illustrate what gradients are, because we talk about gradients a lot, and then how water moves as a result. And if I just do this before I send you into this other work, I think it will make it a lot clearer when you come across different things that you're going to do today. So let me just, I think we got that. So I'm going to stop sharing that, and I'm actually going to share my screen and go to a whiteboard so that I can draw for you more easily. That. So that should accordion down, and then we're going to go here. So you should see a nice blank screen, right? And now I can't actually hear you. So I'm just, if you have a burning question, you'll have to turn your mic on. But I'm going to try to make this really, really clear so that you are not needing to ask any questions. But if you do want to share, please feel free. Okay, so what we're looking at is we're going to talk about, really what we're talking about is what makes water move. I'm going to keep it simple, okay? What makes water move? And that might sound like something simple, but it isn't actually, because we're talking about water moving across membranes from one area to another. And there are some different ways that that can happen depending on something called a gradient. So first of all, let's talk about what that word means. Concentration gradient, because you're going to see that again and again if you haven't already, if you've gotten into the cell membrane readings. So concentration gradient, what that means is really all it is a difference. It's a difference in the amount of solute molecules. And if you need to know, solutes are the stuff that you dissolve in something else, right? And the solvent is almost always going to be water, so we're going to assume that. Of solute molecules from one area to another. And often these areas are separated by cell membranes, which you've been learning about, okay? So that's what a gradient is. It's a difference in solute molecules from one area to another. And that is really almost always what's going to drive water to move, to make up for the difference and create equilibrium. That covers the most difficult part of the next 2 weeks right there, that sentence. So let me kind of draw a diagram here that will let you understand how this is visually. So I'm going to draw, forgive my caffeine shaking hands here a little bit. Okay, so there's a beaker and it has some water in it, beaker number 1. And I'm going to draw another beaker, beaker number 2, everything this so far with some water in it, and beaker number 3. And I'm trying to make them the exact same size, but it might not be, but forgive me. There we go. All right, 3 beakers of water. In each beaker, we are going to pretend that there is a giant red blood cell floating in the beaker. And I know blood cells do not get that big. You would not be able to see it, but we're just going to pretend because we need to understand that there is liquid inside the red blood cell just like there is liquid outside of it. Okay, so there's red blood cell, each one bathing in that water. Now, very, very important, you need to understand that in each of these beakers, there is not just one solution. There's two different solutions in each one of these beakers. There's a solution outside. I know you can see my arrow, I'm hoping. There's a solution outside of the red blood cell, and there's a solution inside, which consists of the cytosol of the cell. You understand what cytosol is. That's the liquid part of the cell that's in between all of the organelles, right? That's what cytosol is. Okay, so if you hear that word, that's just a technical word that means the fluid inside the cell. In both of the solutions, in all three of these beakers, there might be differing amounts of, let's say, salt molecules, all right? Or well, salt ions, sodium chloride. You know what I'm talking about. So inside the red blood cells, let's assume that it's always going to be the same number of salt. I'm just going to draw some little dots to indicate salt ions inside. Okay, the concentration of salt inside each of the cells is a constant. Let's say that if you want to measure it, let's say that inside it's 0.3 molar salt inside. All three, 0.3 molar salt, 0.3 molar salt. And if you take in your chem, you know what molarity is. Okay. It's just a concentration value, 0.3 moles of salt per liter, let's say. Okay. All right. Outside each one of the red blood cells, we're going to have a different concentration of salt. So let's say out here, lots of salt. There's a lot of salt in this very, very salty water. It's a very salty solution that we put this red blood cell in. Lots of, sorry, I'm trying to make dots and I'm being a little sloppy here. Okay, so we've got lots of dots out there. Okay, very high concentration of salt. So let's say it's 0.8 molar out here. Here, it is exactly the same outside as it is inside. So it's 0.3 molar out here, and it's 0.3 molar inside the cell. Here, there's nothing. Zero salt in this water. Okay. All right, so let me ask you this. If you really understand what a concentration gradient is, if I explain that correctly, which ones of these beakers actually have a concentration gradient in them? I know I have to ask you to put a mic on and be brave and tell me. I'll even letter them. Here's A, here's B. I can't see your chats, I'm sorry. You have to tell me. Yep, just please open your mic and go ahead and tell me. Which ones have concentration gradient?
I think A and C.
Yes, that's right. Excellent. I must have explained it well. Okay, so beaker A and beaker C both have a difference in concentration on either side of that membrane. So they have gradients that are set up. They're situations where there's a cell, and inside the cell there's a different concentration of something than there is outside. So there's a gradient here across this membrane, there's a gradient, and there's a gradient here across this one as well. In beaker B, there's no gradient because it's exactly the same. It's already in equilibrium right now. All right, so now maybe you will remember freshman year. Let me see if I can go down a little bit. Can I go down? Yes, there we go. All right, so remember freshman year when there were words called isotonic, hypertonic, and hypotonic? Remember those words? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. All right, so here they come. Which one of these beakers has a blood cell that's floating in an isotonic solution? Which one is floating in an isotonic solution that's isotonic to it?
B.
Yes, that's right. Okay, so this solution here is isotonic to the cell that's floating in it. You could also say that the inside cytosol is isotonic to the solution it's floating in. Okay, an isotonic solution is always going to be, it has equal concentration compared, trying to use good English here, to the solution it is close to, let's say, it's close to, right, on the other side of the membrane, right? All right, so as a result, what's going to happen to this red blood cell over time? Is it going to shrink, grow, stay the same? Somebody be brave.
It's going to stay the same.
That's it. Yes. Okay. Cell stays the same. But what you want to say here is that water will flow. It's just going to flow equally in both directions. So water is going to do something like this. You may remember this little symbol, where the water will flow both ways equally. And that's called dynamic equilibrium. So this cell is already in dynamic equilibrium. But remember that that still means the water's moving. It's just that there's no net change. Okay, so now we're going to go over here to this solution right here, and we're going to give it a definition as well. Would this solution has a higher concentration than the cytosol inside the cell across that membrane. And we already talked about there being a gradient here. But in order to define this solution as being hypertonic, isotonic, or hypotonic, you need those two solutions, and you need to think, which one, hypertonic or hypotonic, is going to be a solution that has a greater concentration than the one it's compared to. And if you could just follow the language there. Is it going to be hyper or hypo? Start writing it. Hyper means more. I'll just do this one for you. Hypertonic. This one will be hypertonic compared to the cytosol. So hypertonic solutions have a greater concentration, greater solute concentration, and I mean solute concentration, than the other solution. In this case, the cytosol inside the cell, right? All right. So in this case, which way is the water going to move here? Is water, remember, is the white spaces between the dots, right? Is water going to move into the cell or out? Just pretend the salt can't move here.
It's going to move out.
Yes. Think about what happens to you when you go to the ocean, right? When you go to the ocean and you go into that seawater that's much saltier than the insides of you, don't you come out feeling a bit dehydrated? You should. You might notice that the thinner membranes around your lips and inside your nose and your eyes are feeling tight, like you've had water drawn out of you. Your skin, not much water gets through there, but your other mucous membranes, the thin areas of your body, are in contact with that very salty water, and that salty water will draw water out of you naturally because osmosis goes right through, and that's very dehydrating. And that's exactly what happens here. So if you put this red blood cell, which is its very thin membrane with no cell wall, into very salty water, what happens is the cell will shrink. The cell shrinks because water moves out in order to try to reach equilibrium, right? Until equilibrium is reached, which, depending on the situation, might never be reached, and you might dry the cell out so much that you'll kill it. Okay, now let's go over to this last one over here. So obviously this solution out here, and again, I'm always going to talk about these external solutions in this example to keep it clear. This is a hypotonic solution. There's O there, there's ER here, they're different, okay? Hypotonic solutions have less solute concentration than the compared solution, right? Than the other solution, which in this case is inside the cell. As a result, obviously now, seems kind of counterintuitive, but what happens with a hypotonic solution? If you dump a red blood cell into a hypotonic solution with nothing in it, you're going to have lots of water flow into the cell. Okay, and as a result, the cell swells and might burst. And again, this is with animal cells. With plant cells, it's different. With a plant cells actually like it because getting more water in there helps their turgor pressure. They have cell walls. Animal cells like ours do not, though. So dumping fresh water around red blood cells is not a good thing. So it might burst as the water moves in. Water moves in until equilibrium is reached. And in this case, it's not going to be reached, right? So you might really have a situation where you have burst cells if you put cells in pure water, or you put them in really, really salty water. Either way, it's not a good thing for our animal cells. So with that, given that, okay, are you guys good with this? Can I leave the screen and come back to you?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to stop sharing and come back to the screen. And I want to ask you a question. All right. Yeah, Kendall, yes. What is it?
So if the concentration is both, or for like a different one, if the concentration is 0 in the cell or the concentration is 0 in the solution, it's never going to reach equilibrium.
Well, it depends on the situation, right? We know that cells always have stuff dissolved in their cytosol, right? So there's always something in there. So if you put an animal cell into pure water, that cell's going to have a problem. It's going to absorb lots of water probably until it bursts. And if you put a cell into very, very salty water, there's actually very few types of animals or plants that can live in really salty water. No cells like that, because it draws water out. It depends on the steepness of the gradient. That's the thing that I think, it's not just that a gradient is present, it's the size of that gradient, right? So if you have like 1.6 molar salt and 0.3 molar inside the cell, that's a very steep gradient. If you only have 0.4 molar salt and 0.3 molar inside the cell, then maybe not so bad. The cell will lose a little water, but maybe it won't die. So excellent question, Kendall. Does that clarify that?
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. So in keeping with that, have you guys ever been or ever known anyone who's been in the hospital and had to have an IV bag connected to them? You ever had a person or been there yourself? I'm sure if you haven't had it done to you, you've seen a loved one that had an IV bag connected to them. So think of that in terms of what you've just learned. The fluid in that IV bag is incredibly powerful stuff. And what do you think that fluid is compared to your red blood cells? Would it be hypertonic, isotonic, or hypotonic to them? What do you think? Chat me your answer. IV bags contain a saline solution, yes, and it better be isotonic. In fact, there are medical companies that create those solutions in vats and load those bags up to send to hospitals. And they have very strict quality control to make absolutely sure that the concentration of salt, saline, inside an IV bag that you're going to attach to a human's bloodstream is isotonic and exactly the same as a person's blood plasma and red blood cells concentration is. Because you give somebody the wrong concentration, and if you put too much in there, you can maybe damage the red blood cells. And if somebody's already, you know, traumatized by something, been in an accident or surgery or something, you definitely don't want to put any more stress on them. So in terms of animals, we need isotonic environments. We need our IV bags to be isotonic. We need our blood plasma already inside us to be fairly isotonic to the cells that the blood goes past and the red blood cells that are in there. So there's your learning point. Now with plants, again, I'm going to make this point again before I forget. You'll get it again. But with plant cells, realize that it's a little different because a plant cell has a cell wall, which is a very nice firm barrier. And the main reason for it is to allow a plant to live successfully in a hypotonic solution. If you think about, you know, rainwater in the soil, that's going to be hypotonic to all the roots and plant parts that are down trying to absorb that water. So plants evolved right away with cell walls that prevent bursting. And in fact, they take advantage of the hypotonic situation to increase the turgor pressure inside their tonoplasm. You should know that term, inside the central vacuole of every plant cell, so that it's full of water that pushes out against the cell walls and actually gives a plant its structure. That's why when you have plants, house plants in your house that are starting to wilt, right? They're starting to wilt, and your mom goes and puts water on them, and what happens? They stand back up because they've regained their turgor pressure thanks to that fresh water hypotonic solution that goes into their cells and fills up their central vacuoles, and they do well with that. So it's a little bit different with plants and animals, but nobody likes lots of salt. Salt can really kill. It's one of the reasons why Genghis Khan would salt all the fields. If he wanted to murder some people, it was a good way to do it. You go and salt all the fields. If they're an agrarian society and they're depending on their crops, you salt a field, you have a hypertonic solution bathing plants for years after that. It's tough to get rid of salt once it's there. And you can't ever grow anything in those fields again because it kills the plants. So happy thoughts. All right, so now let's go to what we're actually going to be doing today. Here we go. So, okay. So what we're going to do is I am once again going to be sending you into breakout groups to do what you need to do. There are only 2 must-dos that I had you listed to do for today. Let me show you what they are. So, okay. There is something called a Wiley tutorial that you click on. It's already there in the Google Classroom, and then there's a Google Doc that you can pull open and fill in while you watch. So I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. And if anybody has trouble with the Adobe flash drive to get it working, I'll run it live in my help room for anybody who wants to just come and do it there. That's fine. And then there's also a Pear Deck on cell transport, which I'm going to open up and make self-paced for you. I'll give you the code for that in a second. And that's it. Those are the must-dos for the day. And then there's the legal size cell transport diagram, which you may have already done because I actually uploaded it for you last week. But if you haven't done it yet, that's your should do and no aspire. Okay. So let me show you the Wiley tutorial so you can actually see what it looks like. I think I just got it up. Here it is. There, see that? So when you click on the application that's there, it looks like this, and it's got a goldfish on it. And then you go to these arrows down here, and you can push it to each slide, and the questions that I printed out for you it tells you exactly what slide to get the answers from. Okay, so it's pretty. I made it really easy to follow, and some of it's a little advanced, but the answers are there. And if you have questions, you can come and ask me. So that's one thing that you could do today. And then the other thing is the Pear Deck, which I have to actually activate. Just do it this way. Okay, no, that's for freshmen. Okay, this one. Okay, so I'm gonna make it student paced so you can go in and do it at your leisure. Yeah, got it. No. Okay. All right. So I think I can, if I just link this in the chat room, I think you'll be able to get into it. If you can't, let me know. I'm just going to link it right here. Okay. See if you can open that up and see if it works. I just want to make sure. If not, I'll just put it in Google Classroom for you. Are you able to get in? Just let me know. Yes. Oh, jeez. All right. Let me just fix this then. I'm gonna put it in the Google Classroom underneath the Wiley tutorial, and you can find it there. Okay. Sorry about that. I don't know why it does that. Oh, I'm just going to let you go get in your breakout rooms, and you can get started on something, and then it'll be there for you when you're ready. Where am I going here? Here we go. Okay. So breakout rooms as we usually do them. Did you guys have a nice weekend? I didn't even ask. Was it a good weekend? Yeah. Oh, I did. Yes. Actually, finally, just I didn't do any work on Saturday. I actually worked through the last 2 weekends, but this weekend I was just like, no, I'm not doing any work. No. Okay. And everybody needs a day like that, and so do you guys. So beware of working. Yes. Yes, it was actually kind of nice. I spent a lot of time in the sunshine with my dog. I was with my dog. I have who's a hound, and she requires a lot of attention, which is fine. But she's kind of wearing us out a little bit, but it's actually probably good for us. It gets us outside and interacting with life instead of staying inside and just, watching Netflix, which I probably would have done. Okay, so you can move wherever you like, and I'll get that pear deck up for you in just a few minutes.